How's it going, guys? My name is Jason and I am one of the co-founders here at SWAT English Academy in the Gangnam district of Seoul, South Korea, and I've been an English educator for over 17 years. And today we're going to be taking a look at the six different subject areas of English education. And we're going to be discussing which ones are most important in our overall English language learning experience. So without further ado, let's take a look at these six areas and let's rock and roll. Let's do this. Okay, so when it comes to the six pillars of English language education, we're looking at basically in Korea, as it's taught in Korea, we're looking at vocabulary, grammar, reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Generally, these are the six subject areas that are taught pretty much all the academies. Students will ask, teacher, what's the most important one? The problem here is the actual wording of the question itself. What is it exactly that you mean by improve in English, and what exactly are your goals when studying this language? When I think learning a language, if I want to learn a language, if I want to improve in a language, any language, English, Russian, Korean, French, doesn't matter, then the starting point has to be listening. You've actually got to hear these words being spoken. You've got to hear these things being pronounced and said in the way that they're naturally said, in the intonation that they naturally use. You'd want to hear these things and we mimic them, right? Think about any time you visited another country and you wanted to learn, how do I say thank you? How do I say sorry? What's the first thing we do? We ask someone, how do we say thank you in this language? They tell us, we hear it, and then we mimic them. We speak it over and over again. Listening and speaking are generally the first two pillars of all language acquisition. Afterwards, if we want to actually refine or improve our fluency, that's when we would probably focus on things like vocabulary and grammar. Vocab as in just learning new words. Hey, how do I say microphone in this language? How do I say tabletop in this language? After acquiring enough vocabulary, we then study the grammar to have a general idea of how the sentences are structured. And that's how we actually acquire language if we look at these six different subject areas. We hear the language first, we mimic it through speaking, then we learn words by either studying vocabulary or asking people. We acquire more vocabulary. Then, of course, we study the grammar to figure out how to organize our sentences. And then at the very end of all of that, if you've managed to go through those four steps with some level of proficiency, then at the end, possibly reading or writing in a language, but that would actually come at the end. I mean, think about it. How many people who are learning a language will immediately get a book and start reading in that language, or will grab a piece of paper or a journal and start writing in that language? That's something you do after you've learned the language, after you feel a certain level of comfort with the language. Then it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to try to read a book in this language, or hey, I'm going to try to write down my own thoughts in this language. But generally, those things I find come at the end. It's listening and speaking first, vocabulary, grammar second, then reading and writing last if your goal is overall fluency. Now, if your goal is to master English, to improve in English, to do well on a standardized test, something like the Korean SAT or the Suneung, if your goal is, listen, I don't really care if I can speak English or if I can understand it conversationally, I don't care about any of that. I just want to do well on the English section of the Korean SAT. Well, then the subject matter that you focus on is going to be flipped. It's going to be totally different. If your goal is test-based English, then I would say the thing of number one importance, the area of number one importance would actually be reading, guys. The more you read, the more you'll be able to read correct grammatical structure. So any grammar errors that you make when you're writing and when you're speaking, you'll actually see the correct forms of those sentence structures through text. Getting as much of that background information is really, really helpful for test-based language language studies. After reading, I would say it would probably come grammar, because on the Korean SAT, they do have grammar related questions where you're forced to identify which of these sentences is incorrect or which of these sentences is grammatically correct. This is a section or a chunk of the Korean SAT. Following reading and grammar, I would say then vocabulary would probably come third. Try to learn as many words as you can, because there are also vocabulary questions on these standardized tests always. That's just part and parcel with the whole thing. And then finally, towards the end, I would say writing, because a lot of standardized tests or a lot of companies, let's say, do require an essay. So writing would probably come after reading, grammar, and vocabulary. I would probably focus on my writing. Can I write a 5-paragraph essay? Can I effectively be persuasive in my language? And then at the end, I would say comes listening and speaking. There is a listening section on the Korean SAT, on the English section of the Korean SAT. However, it is not very many questions. It's far shorter than the reading section and the grammar section. There's less questions. The listening passage is quite easy as well. So listening, I think, would be a lot less important if your goal is to do well on a standardized test. Finally, at the end, which makes very little sense, is actually speaking. As an educator, if you actually look at the general patterns that we notice, what we'll notice is the Korean education system clearly shows or identifies that speaking is the least important of these areas, because what will happen is students are incredibly fluent in kindergarten or in the lower grades when they're learning in curriculums that are entirely in English. So they go to English kindergarten, everything's done in English, the teacher speaks English, all the activities are done in English. These kids actually come out of English kindergarten quite fluent. They're able to speak, they're conversational right off the bat. Once they get into high school, they're basically, the speaking, the amount of time devoted to English speaking is nil. So what you'll find is kids who were once really incredibly fluent when they were young, by the time they've graduated high school, they've got the thick Korean accent. They're doing, teacher, I don't know what to. They're doing the whole thing, the Konglish thing. That's because there is no focus or emphasis placed on speaking in the Korean education system. So speaking, if you want to become fluent in a language, I would say speaking should probably be at the top of your to-do list. But if you want to do well in the Korean English education system, speaking actually is the least prioritized subject. And it's very evident when you see these students and how their English education progresses. All right, guys, so I hope you guys enjoyed that little breakdown where we covered the 6 different pillars, or the 6 fundamental aspects of English language study here in South Korea. We have listening, speaking, vocab, grammar, reading, and writing. And so which one of these subject areas is most important? Well, that all depends on your goals. If you guys have any questions regarding SWAT English Academy, all of our contact information should be in the description box down below. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. We will be back with more informative breakdowns and videos on our channel. Until then, I can't thank you guys enough for joining me, and I'll see you guys in a bit. Peace.